Hi, my beautiful people. How are you all doing? Well, I am really pumped up today because here it's a sunny day and I'm really enjoying it. And I really hope that you have an amazing day as mine. This is Janvi here, your history educator on Study Room, and we were studying chapter 4th, which is Forest Society and Colonialism, right? So, we already completed about reading about Forest Society. Now, we'll have to go on to colonialism, which we'll be studying with the help of two case studies. One is the Buster case study, which is a district in Chhattisgarh, and the other one is in Java, which is Indonesia. Okay, so and thereafter we'll take a few of the questions. Okay, so let's just start. Okay, so first of all, we have the rebellion in the forest. Okay, so we are going to start with the Buster district of Chhattisgarh. So, in many parts of India and across the world, forest communities they were like rebelling against the changes that were being imposed on them. So there were some tribal leaders like Sidhu and Kanu in Santhal Parganas. So Parganas is basically a group of villages. A cluster of villages is called Parganas. Okay. Okay. So Parganas. So there were some tribal leaders who were rebelling against the changes which were being imposed on them. So for example, we have Sidhu and Kanu. Okay, these are the first tribal leaders. Then there was Birsa Munda, very, very important, of Chota Nagpur Plateau. So this is the second one. So you'll have to mention these personalities. And then there was Alluri Sitaram Raju of Andhra Pradesh. So these were few of the tribal leaders who were, rebelling against the colonial forest policies. So the new forest laws, they were rebelling against it. Okay. Then next we have the people of Bastar. Okay, so where was Bastar exactly? Bastar is located in the southernmost part of Chhattisgarh. Okay, so where is Bastar? It is located in the southernmost part of Chhattisgarh. Yeah. So Bastar, it is located in the southernmost part of Chhattisgarh and it borders Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and Maharashtra. Okay. So the central part of Bastar is actually on a plateau. So it's a plateaued kind of thing. So the central part of Bastar is on a plateau. Then to the north of this plateau is the Chhattisgarh plain and to the south of it is the Godavari plain. And there's this river Indravati which winds across Bastar from east to west. So from east to west, it is river Indravati. Okay. Now, since each village knows where its boundaries lie, okay, so in the Bastar district, there are many villages, as I told you, right? So, since each village knows that where its boundaries lie, so the local people they look after all the natural resources within that boundary. Okay, so wherever their boundary exists, like to whichever point it exists, they're gonna look over all the natural resources of that boundary, of that area. Now, if people from a village they want to take some wood from the forest of another village, then they have to pay a small fee, which was called Devsari. So the fee was called Devsari. Okay, and Devsari or Dand, or they would might have to exchange a man. Like okay, so this is what they used to exchange. So the fee was called Devsari or Dand or man. All right, so this is used to be the exchange system they used to follow. Now, some villages they also protected their forest by engaging watchmen, and each household it contributes some grain to pay them. Okay, so like in the form of grains, they were paying the watchmen. Every year, there's one big hunt where the headmen of the villages in a paragna, which is a group of villages, they meet and discuss the issues of concern, including the forest. Now, Bastar, it is actually home to different communities. So, very, very important, like which communities actually lie under the Bastar district. So, it is home to different communities like Maria and Muria Gonds. So, do remember these, which are the highlighted ones. So, Maria and Muria Gonds, then Durvas, then Bhatras and Halbas. So Bastar is home to such communities, tribal communities. Now these tribes, they actually believe that each village was given its land by the earth. So this is one of their beliefs, that okay, they see that each land has been given by the earth and they have to make some offerings to the earth at agricultural festival which they used to celebrate. Okay, so this is about the people of Bastar. Now, the fears of the people. So, when the forest laws were made, so what were the fears of the people then? So, and actually, in 1905, the colonial government, it proposed to reserve two-thirds of the forest and stop shifting cultivation, hunting, and collection of forest produce. So, do remember that in 1905, the colonial government, it proposed to reserve two-third of the forest. Okay, so two-third of the forest was reserved, and shifting cultivation was stopped, hunting was stopped, and there was no collection of forest produce also. Now, some people, there were some people who used to stay in forest. That's very obvious, by working free for the forest department. So those were called the forest villagers. So those people who are working free for the forest department, they are called forest villagers. Okay, so do remember forest villagers. So it includes those people who are working free for the forest department. All right. Now, villagers for a long run, they suffered from increased land. So, what were the fears of the people? So, when the new forest laws were made, so the first fear, it was that they suffered from increased land rents and frequent demands of labor and goods. Okay, then there was also displacement of tribals without notice or compensation. Then, so do remember, these are the two important points, that there were increased land rents and demands for free labor, and then there was displacement of tribals without notice. Apart from that, there were famines which occurred in 1899 to 1900, and again in 1907 and 1908. And then again there was forced free labor, which I told you, forest villagers thing in reserved forest. Okay, so this is like they used to work for free for the forest department, but they were actually forcibly told to do so. Okay, so these were the fears of the people. Now, next up, we have the rebellions by the forest people. Now, obviously, they are facing so many hardships, so they are gonna revolt, right? So, rebellions by the forest people. So, people began to gather and discuss these issues, like whatever was happening, in their village councils, in bazaars, at festivals, or wherever the headmen and the priest of several villages they were assembled. So, they used to discuss such issues. Now, the initiative, it was actually taken by the Durvas of the Kangar forest. Okay, so do remember that initiative was taken by Durvas. It has come up before, right? Durvas, that is one of the communities. So, initiative was taken by Durvas. They were of the Kangar forest. Okay, so there actually reservation used to took, like there, that was the first place where reservation took place, like for the first time. Now, although there was no single leader, but many people they speak of Gundadhur. So he was their leader at that time. So Gundadhur. Okay. So although there was no single leader, but many people speak of Gundadhur, who was from village Nethanhar, as an important figure in the movement. So he was actually leading their rebellion. Now, bazaars that time they were looted, the houses of officials and traders, then the schools and police stations they were burned down and robbed, and the grain it was redistributed again. So that's how the rebellion was, growing day by day. Now, most of them who were attacked, they were in some way associated with the colonial state and its oppressive laws. So they were attacking the forest officials, the people who used to work for the colonial government. In fact, in 1910, mango bowls, a lump of earth, chilies, and arrows, they began circulating between villages. So, what are all these? These are kind of messages which they used to, communicate with. So, these were the messages which used to invite villagers to rebel against the British. So, these are some of the ways where they can be seen, circulating the messages. So, do remember these ways also. All right. So this is, this slide actually shows, okay, this is how the rebellion was taking place and it was growing day by day by the forest people against the colonial government. Now, what was the British response to such rebellion? So the British, when it saw that okay, the houses are being burnt of the people who are related to somehow connected to the colonial state, so the British, they sent troops to suppress the rebellion. Obviously, they want to suppress it, right? And they surrounded their camps and fired upon them. They marched through the villages, flogging and punishing those who had taken part in the rebellion. So actually, it's very obvious that he was a great leader, Gundadhar Dhur, and Britishers, they actually never managed to capture Gundadhar. In a victory for the rebels, so this was a victory for the rebels. So work on the reservation thing, it was temporarily suspended. So because the rebellion because of that rebellion, the rebels, that is the forest people, they were winning. So there was this one thing, that reservation was temporarily suspended. Okay, so this was one of the bright side of the rebellion, that reservation was temporarily suspended, and the area was to be, the that was reserved, it was to be reduced by 5%. Okay, so do remember, these are the brighter aspects of the rebellion, which was won by the forest people. All right. Now, next up, we have World Bank's proposal in the 1970s. It's really important that how was World Bank taking this rebellion? The story of the forest and people of Bastar does not end here. After independence, the same practice of keeping people out of the forest and reserving them for industrial use continued. So this is called reservation. Reservation basically means, okay, these are, a group of people, and they're not gonna the British government are gonna keep such people out of the forest and reserve them only for industrial use. So that was called reservation. So that activity was just temporarily suspended during that time. So it still continued after independence. So this is an example of colonialism even after independence. Okay, so colonialism was still there after independence. After independence. All right. Yeah. So, developed countries, they had this control that, obviously they are developed countries, so they used to still control the resources. So, Britain, because India was a colony of Britain, so Britain, being a developed country, it used to control the resources. Even then, even when the rebellion was won by the forest officials, but still they used to reserve people for just industrial use. So there was this World Bank's proposal in 1970s, which was which came into picture. So the World Bank, it proposed to replace 4,600 hectares of natural sal forest by tropical pine, just to do what? To provide pulp for the paper industry. So this project was actually stopped due to protest by the local environmentalists. So this is the kind of the effects of this rebellion on the developed countries, like World Bank was seeing it. Okay, so this is one of the examples where you can put, okay, this was the impact of rebellion, because it was stopped by the local environmentalist. All right, so this was all about the case study of Bastar. Now we are going to jump on to the forest transformations in Java, which is in Indonesia. Okay, so Java is in Indonesia. So first of all, we have colonialism in Indonesia. All right. So first of all, I'll just tell you what all Java country is all about. Okay. So Java, it is famous as a rice producing island in Indonesia. Okay. So do remember that Java is a rice producing, it's a rice producer. Okay, so it's a rice producing island in Indonesia, which was once covered mostly with the forest. Like once during that time, it was covered mostly with the forest. Now, do remember that there were many similarities in the forest laws, which were made for Indonesia as well as in India. So the forest laws which were made in Indonesia and India, they had many similarities. So here, when we talk about colonialism in Indonesia, so Java is the, like, it is the region where the Dutch started the forest management. Like for the first time, the Dutch were the ones who started the forest management. Okay, so like the Britishers, the Dutch people, they also wanted timber to build ships. So it's the same thing. So just like the Britishers, the Dutch people, they also wanted timber. to build their ships and to, for railway lines and all. So Dutch wanted timber production. Okay, so this is how colonialism in Indonesia was growing. Now we are going to study about the woodcutters of Java. So how we studied about the people of Bastar, that is how we are going to study about the woodcutters of Java. So there's this one tribe which was of skilled forest cutters, which are called Kalangs. So just how, likewise how we are studying the, like how before we studied the tribal communities of Bastar, here also we have few of the tribal communities. So one of them is Kalangs. So do remember this Kalangs, okay? So these are a tribe of skilled forest cutters. So the Kalangs of Java, because they were skilled forest cutters and they were shifting cultivators too. So, they were so valuable in 1755 when the Mataram kingdom of Java split. So, there was this one Mataram kingdom of Java. So, when they split it up, so this tribe was so valuable that 6,000 Kalang families, they were equally divided between the two kingdoms. So, that's how, like, there were two kingdoms which were formed after the split. So, 6,000 families, Kalang families, they were equally divided between the two kingdoms. So, that's how important they were. Now, without their expertise, it would have been difficult to harvest teak and for the kings to build their palaces. So, do remember that that's like, how much importance they hold. So, without them, they were like it was difficult to harvest teak. And they were also helping the kings to build their palaces. Now, the Dutch, they actually, when they came, so they actually tried to make this tribe of Kalangs work under them. In 1770, the Kalangs, they resisted, so that's how the rebellion began. That's how the rebellion, appeared and it was growing. That the Kalangs resisted by attacking a Dutch fort at Juana, but the uprising was suppressed. Like in the end, it was suppressed. Okay, so this is one of the rebellion by the Kalangs tribe. Now there's this one Dutch scientific forestry. In the 19th century, when it became important to control the territory and not just people, okay, so they have to control the territory also. So the Dutch enacted the forest laws in Java. Just like Britishers were enacting forest laws in India, same way Dutch were enacting forest laws in Java. So what were they doing? They were restricting the villagers' access to forest. Now under such laws, so under these forest laws, so what were the forest laws made by the Dutch people? Sorry. Yeah. So the forest laws which were made by Dutch. So first of all, they told that wood could only be cut for specified purposes, like making river boats or constructing houses, and only from specific forest under close supervision. So basically, they were putting a very great amount of effort when you have to go for wood cutting and all. So wood could only be cut for specified purposes. We can write as okay, wood cutting for specified purposes. Okay, so this is one of the forest laws. Then next up we have that the villagers, they were punished for grazing cattle in young stands, transporting wood without a permit, or traveling on forest roads without horse carts or cattle. So this is how people were being punished also. So people being punished, like there were a lot of activities for which they were punished. So one of them was for grazing cattle in young lands, like young stands or lands, whatever you call it. So people being punished for grazing cattle in young stands. And apart from that, like even if people are transporting wood without a permit, they were punished. Then for traveling on forest roads without horse or carts, then also they were punished. Now there's this one value that okay, in 1882, 2,80,000 sleepers, they were exported from Java alone, and all this required labor to cut the trees. Okay, so when the sleepers were being exported, So all of this required labor to cut the trees, transport the logs, and prepare the sleepers. Now, you know what actually happened, that initially there was this one system which Dutch used to follow. So initially the Dutch, they imposed rents on land which was being cultivated in the forest, and then they exempted, like after some time, they exempted some villages from these rents only if they worked to provide, like only if they worked collectively to provide free labor and buffaloes for cutting and transporting timber. So this system was known as Bland-Dongdijn-Steen system. Okay, so very, very important. So the Dutch, they used to follow a Bland-Dongdijn-Steen system. So it's a very long word, but it's really easy to pronounce, it. So it's called Bland-Dongdijn-Steen system. Okay, so initially the Dutch used to impose the rents and all, okay, on the cultivated land. But afterwards they used to exempt, like afterwards they started exempting those villages who are working collectively to provide free labor and buffaloes for cutting and transporting timber. So that system was called Bland-Dong-Dynstein system. Yeah. Okay. Now, next is Samin's challenge. Okay, so around 1890s, there was this one teak forest, there was this one man called Surantiko Samin. Okay, so Surantiko Samin of Ramduk Latung village. So he was, a teak forest villager. So he began questioning. He's just a teak forest villager, okay, but he's a prominent figure. Yeah. So this Randub Latung village, it's a teak forest village, and Vahaka, there's this person called Surantiko Sami. He began questioning the state ownership of the forest. So this was in around 1890s. So, and apart from questioning the state ownership of the forest, okay, that is being owned by this forest department, that is the colonial Dutch and all. So, apart from that, he also argued that the state had not created the wind, water, earth, and wood, so it could not own it. So, he was actually arguing about this key. Okay, the state has not created the wind, which is natural, then water, which is natural, earth, and wood, so it cannot be even able to own it, like it doesn't have a right to own it, right? So soon, because of this, a widespread movement developed. Then by 1907, 3,000 families, they were following his ideas. So that's how, he's kind of a whistleblower, so people were following his ideas. Now, some of the Samanists, they protested by lying down. So this is how they were protesting. So they protested by lying down on their land when the Dutch came to survey it, while others, they refused to pay taxes or fines or perform labor. So they were basically revolting. Okay. So do remember that how they were protesting. So by lying down on their land when the Dutch came to survey it, or what they were doing, they refused to pay the rents, pay the taxes or fines which were imposed on them to perform labor. Okay. So they refused to pay taxes or fines or perform labor. Like they were completely against it. Okay, we are not gonna, perform any free labor for you guys. So this is how they were revolting. And it was all because there was this prominent figure called Surantiko Sami. So he was actually, a kind of a leader. He stood as a leader and people were following his ideas. All right. Now, war and deforestation. So, what was the impact of both the wars, First World War and Second World War, on like forest by because of that deforestation, right? So the First World War and the Second World War had a major impact on forest. So because the Japanese won the war, so winning in the war, the Japanese then started exploiting the forest recklessly for their war industries, because Japan, it was one of the allied forces, right? So it won the war. So they started exploiting the forest recklessly for their war industries. Then they used to force the forest villagers to cut down their own forest. So this is how Japanese were, putting out their control. Like they were exerting their authority over the forest villagers. Now, after the war, it was difficult for after the war, because the Japanese have won. So it was difficult for the Indonesian Forest Service to get this land back. So as in India, like if I just compare it, so as in India, people's need for agricultural land has brought them into conflict with the forest department's desire to control the land and exclude people from it. So this is what exactly was happening there also, that the Indonesian Forest Service, it was difficult for them to get this land back. So, actually, there was this one policy which the Dutch used to follow. So, before the Japanese occupied Java, the Dutch, they used to follow a scorched earth policy. So, very, very important. Okay, this scorched earth policy. So, here they used to destroy the sawmills. So, under this policy, they used to destroy the sawmills. Then they used to burn huge piles of giant teak logs. So, burning teak. Okay, so that they would not fall into Japanese hands. So this is what they used to do earlier, like before the Japanese had a control on the Dutch people, that is on Java. So they used to follow this scorched earth policy. But after that, when Japanese came into power, they started exploiting these forests and like recklessly for their war industries. So do remember that after the war, what was happening? So Japan, after war, Japan used to exploit the forest for industrial purpose, so for industries. Okay, so do remember that before the war, the Dutch used to follow a scorched earth policy, but after that, the Japan, they had taken the entire control of over Java, and the Dutch obviously, and they were exploiting the forest recklessly for their war industries. Then they used to force the villagers to cut down their own trees, and because of all of this, it was difficult for the Indonesian Forest Service to get this land back. Okay, now I think it's about, okay, now the last thing, it is about new developments in forestry. This is the last thing we are going to study in this chapter, and it is about new developments in forestry. So, conservation of forest, it has become a more important goal nowadays. So these are, like, I'm going to talk about what are the new developments in forestry so far in India. So conservation of forest has become a more important goal, right? So in many places across India, from Mizoram to Kerala, dense forests have survived only because village protected them in sacred groves. So sacred groves, it's really important. For example, sacred groves known as Sarnas, Devarkadu, Kan and Rai. Okay, so do remember that if we talk about India, so from Mizoram to Kerala, conservation has been a big thing. Why? Because the villages have protected them in sacred groves. So sacred groves known as Sarnas, Devarkadu, Kan and Rai. So these are some of the sacred groves which have been found in India. So here it's actually, this is one of Devkar. It is a sacred grove of Kodagu. So you can find a video over here. So I'm just gonna give you a gist of what that video entails. So in the video talks about the sacred groves of Kerala. Okay. So the video talks about the sacred groves of Kerala. So, they have been described, the sacred groves. So, it is stretched. So, these sacred groves, it is stretched to just 1.5 square kilometer, and it shelters around 700 species. So, that's how important sacred groves are. Like, it has been covering a very small area, but it covers around 700 species. However, what is happening with rapid industrialization and urbanization, we are losing them, right? So just, in this video, here's a positive approach, and that is, let us just conserve these biodiversity vaults for a better future and for a better life. So this is what is given in the video. Now, since the 1980s, governments across Asia and Africa, they have begun to see that scientific forestry. So it's very important that scientific forestry, we have studied this before also under Brandis, right? So he used to teach scientific forestry at the Dehradun Institute. So basically this forestry tells about, how to conserve the forest and all, like how the natives can also do it. So since the 1980s, governments across Asia and Africa, they have begun to see that the scientific forestry and the policy of keeping the forest communities away from forest had resulted in many conflicts. So, what the government is trying to do, they are trying to keep such tribes and communities away from such sacred groves, away from such reserved forests, protected forests. But that shouldn't be the case. They should be allowed to stay there because they are the real ones. They are the ones who will be safeguarding it because they know how it is produced, like what all species are there. So it's really important that, just to avoid such conflicts between the communities, tribal communities and the government, these people should be allowed to stay there, like in those reserved and protected forest. Okay, so this was all about our chapter, that is forest society and colonialism. Now we are going to take a few of the questions. Okay, so the first question is, discuss how the changes in forest management in the colonial period affected the following people. Okay, yeah. So the first one which were affected were shifting cultivators. So what you can mention, first of all, you can mention what is shifting cultivation. Okay, so here you can mention about shifting cultivation. Like what is it? So we have already studied the process and all. Then, since the European foresters, they felt that it would harm, like shifting cultivation would harm the forest and the valuable timber would be lost. So thus the forest department, it banned shifting cultivation, which caused displacement of many cultivators. So do remember that also. So do mention about the ban on shifting cultivation. All right. Now, the second one, we have the nomadic and pastoralist communities. So, the nomadic and pastoralist communities, they moved about where? So, in the mountains, in the plains, in the deserts, then in the plateaus of India and Africa. Okay. Now, when the colonial government, it established I'm sorry. Yeah. So when the colonial government established control over the forest, like when the Britain government came, right? So it affected the pastoralist communities in a very big way. So they always moved from place. So who are nomadists? So people who are, used to, like people who are used to being displaced from one place to another with their cattle, right? So they don't have a permanent place to stay. So they always used to move from place to place with their cattle. But when forests were, they started getting destroyed by the government to expand agriculture. So these nomads, they lost their grazing fields for their cattle. So hence that brought them great hardships. So you can just mention about who these people are, right? So who these people are, and then how the new forest laws, because they were like the new forest laws, it actually wanted the forest to be cut down, right? So how that impacted the nomads. So because they used to, like, roam here and there from place to place with their cattle, so the grazing fields, they were lost by the nomads. So grazing fields were lost. Okay, now next we have the firms trading in timber or forest produce. Okay, so what were the firms? So there were large expanses of forest were, so you already know this, that there were large expanses of forest which were cut down for timber and forest produce, right? As told by the Britain government, colonial government. Now seeing this, the colonial government was worried, and thus it passed the Indian Forest Act in 1865. So we have already seen this, that for timber production, the European foresters, they were cutting down. Sorry, they felt it harmful, right? But for timber production, because it was a commercial demand from Europe side, so they were cutting down. So seeing this, the colonial government, it was worried, and thus it passed the Indian Forest Act in 1865. So do mention about Indian Forest Act of 1865, which divided the forest into three categories: reserve, protected, and village forest. And so, the villagers and the local firms, they could not take anything from the reserve forest. As I've already told you, that from reserve forest, they could not take anything. So, do mention about reserved forest. And this, greatly affected the traders immensely because they could not take anything from the reserve forest. Next up, we have the plantation owners. So, vast areas of forest, they were given to European planters at a very cheap rate by the colonial government. This we have studied already, that there were vast areas of forest which were just given to the European planters at a very cheap rate by the colonial government. So, there were natural forests which were cleared, like they were cut down to cultivate tea, coffee, and rubber trees, which were demanded in Europe. So, you can mention about this. Okay. So plantation owners, so European planters getting the forest at a very cheap rate. All right, and they used to produce what all? So they used to cut down the forest just to cultivate tea, coffee, and rubber trees, which were demanded actually in Europe. Now, the last thing which we have is kings or British officials who were engaged in hunting. You already know that hunting was a big sport, right? It was a big gaming sport. So, forest laws banned hunting of deer, partridges, and small animals, right? So, people who lived near the forest were deprived of their livelihood, obviously, because they used to depend on hunting, right? So, people who used to live near the forest, they were deprived of their livelihood and food because of this ban. Now, contrary to this ban, the hunting of big animals. So, this is when we are talking about small animals. So, that actually caused a deprivation of the cultivator's livelihood. But when we talk about hunting of big animals like tiger, leopard, and wolves, so that became a sport for the kings and the Britishers, right? So, hunting of big animals. So, that became a sport, right? And the British felt that by killing dangerous animals, it would be able to civilize India. So, do mention this, that civilize India. So, Britishers thought that okay, if we are teaching, Indians that you have to kill the dangerous animals, the wild animals, then you'll be able to you'll be able to become more civilized. So, this almost made certain species of animals extinct by the end. So, species got extinct. All right. Now let's take up the next question. Okay. The question second, it asks that what are the similarities between the colonial government of the forest in Bastar and in Java? It can be actually asked, like it's a very general question to be asked because we have already read about the case studies. So first of all, let me talk about Bastar. Okay. So in Bastar in 1905, the colonial government it proposed to reserve two-third of the forest, right? So two-third of the forest were reserved. Then they stopped shifting cultivation, hunting, and collection of forest produce. After that, the villagers they were suffering from fears of the people. So do mention about the fears of the people. So they were suffering from increased land rents and the demand for free labor and goods by the colonial officials. So fears of the people. Then, in the reserved forest, the villagers they had to work free for the forest and help them in cutting and transporting trees and protecting them from the forest fires. So this was called the forest villagers, like the forest villages, right? Basically, they used to work for free, right? So do remember that in reserve forest, the villagers had to work for they had to work free for the forest. So villagers working free. Okay. Now next up we are gonna see in Java. So what was in Java? Okay, so in Java, here the villagers they were punished for grazing cattle. As I've already told you that they were punished, right? There were the new forest laws which were made, and the people were punished for grazing cattle. Then if they were transporting wood without permit, so punished people for grazing cattle in the young lands, right? Then transporting goods without permit, and then you can also mention about the Blandong dynasty system. Okay, so Blandong dynasty system. So you can mention about that as well. Okay. Now let's take up the next question. So question number third, it is about discuss the role of the following factors that caused the decline of forest cover in India between 1880 and 1920. Okay, so first of all, it is railways shipbuilding. So, there was expansion of the railways, so that became a necessity. Why? As trade and transportation increased. So, do remember this that expansion of railways because of trade and transportation. So, as trade and transportation increased, railways were expanded. Right? So wood was needed obviously to run the rail, like obviously to run the trains, wood was needed, right? So as a fuel. So wood was needed as fuel to run the steam locomotives, and it was also needed to lay the railway line sleeper, that is the tracks, which held the tracks together. Right? So forest, they were destroyed. So in this way, forests were being destroyed to provide the wood which was needed for the expansion of the railways. Next, we have agricultural expansion. Now, how agricultural expansion was resulting into forest reduction. So as the population increased over the centuries, the demand for food also increased, right? So obviously it's quite clear that it's very obvious that population will increase, so the demand for food will also increase, right? And as the demand for food, like just to meet the increased demand for food, more land had to be cultivated. So like more land had to be cultivated. And if more land had to be cultivated, the forest will have to be cleared down, right? So they had to be destroyed and brought under the plow. So because of this, forest reduction. Okay, so hence the decline of the forest cover. Then next up we have commercial farming. So commercial farming, during the colonial period, the demand for commercial crops, which were the commercial crops like jute, then sugar, then wheat and cotton, right? So that increased, right, during the colonial period. So Europe, it needed more food grain for its growing population and more raw material for its growing industrialization, that is industrial production. So hence forests were again destroyed to enable this commercial farming. Next we have tea or coffee plantations. So, for tea and coffee plantations, there were vast areas of forest which were given to European planters. As I've already told you, that vast areas of forest which were given to European planters at a very cheap rate by the colonial government. So, natural forest, they were cleared to cultivate tea and coffee, as this was actually a great demand. Like there was a great demand for such commodities in Europe. Okay, so tea and coffee plantations. So you can mention about European planters getting land at cheap rates. So because they got it at cheap rates, so they were cultivating tea and coffee because those were the commodities, like the most popular commodities which were required in Europe. And finally, we have the Adivasis and other peasants. So, only one sixth of India's land mass, it was under cultivation in the 1600s. Like if I talk about 1600s, then only one sixth of India's land mass was under cultivation. But now when we talk, more than half the land mass is under cultivation. Okay, so why? Because the population has increased rapidly, right? So as the demand for food went up, so again the same thing, that population is increasing, right? So the demand for food will also increase, and because of that, what happens, that the peasants, they started extending the boundaries of cultivation. They started to clear up the forest and cultivating new land, because obviously they need their land, right? So the peasants, they started extending the boundaries of cultivation. So boundary of cultivation increased. Okay. Yeah. So this was all about question number third. I hope you are understanding. Now, here's just a fun activity. So, have there been changes in forest areas, like ever where you live? So, if yes, do mention about it. And you have to find out what these changes are and why they have happened. So, if you are staying, I think I can give one example. So, if you're from Maharashtra, then you must have heard about RA forest. So, if you remember RA forest, they were being cut down to make space for the car shed for the metro thing, right? So why normally these changes happen, why forests are being cut down for industrial purpose or to make houses, buildings, whatever. So you can mention about that. Okay, it's just an activity for you guys. So you can, whatever you are observing here and there, like in and around your place, you can just mention it and mention that what all changes are happening and why they are happening, like because of what reason. And you can also mention about the measures which you will take to stop it or just to prevent it. Okay. Now, the last question, it is about why are forests affected by wars? Okay, so we have already studied that the First World War and Second World War, it left a deep impact on the forest. So, First and Second World War, it left a deep impact on the forest, right? Now, the working plans, they were given up, and like whatever they were following already, that all was given up, and trees were cut to fulfill the war needs. So basically, trees were being cut to fulfill what? Fulfill the war needs. All right. Now in Java, if I talk, so just before the Japanese attacked the island, the Dutch used to follow what? A scorched earth policy, right? So do remember this, Dutch following the, but this is all before Japanese attacked Java. So Dutch following the scorched earth policy. All right, where they used to destroy the sawmills and they used to burn huge piles of teak wood. And when the Japanese came, so they also, when they came to Java, they also started exploiting the forest to their own needs. Okay, so this all you can mention. So Japanese started to exploit the forest. All right. So this was all about the chapter. Now in the next video, like we have already completed the chapter, just a small video is left, which will be a recap, a quick recap according to the timelines and few of the pointers, what all we have studied so far. So that we are gonna take up in the next video. So just give a rough, like you'll have to study everything about these case studies, Bastar and Java. It's really, really significant and important for the exams. So do give it a read and try writing down the answers, because obviously it's history and you'll have to write down the stories, like how the people were there in Java and busters and woodcutters of Java, right? So that's all for today, and thank you for being here with me on study room. And bye bye, I'll see you in the next video. We are going to take the quick recap of this chapter. Okay, have a nice day. Bye bye.